a dying Apache woman, abandoned beneath the burning Arizona sun, and one cowboy who made a choice that shocked everyone. He gave her his only horse and walked for hours through the deadly desert so she could survive. But when he reached her tribe, he never expected what happened next. 50 priceless horses, a powerful alliance, and a love that would change two worlds forever. Stay until the end, because this incredible true-to-heart story proves that one act of kindness can rewrite history, and what happened next will leave you speechless. Watch Love in the Wild West on the next video app as soon as possible. Please subscribe to my channel. Here is the English translation of the script. I have corrected the name inconsistencies, changing Sina to Sina for consistency, and smoothed out the narrative flow while keeping the dramatic tone intact. Colt Morrison never imagined that this scorching Tuesday would be different from any other. He had been tracking lost cattle through the northern canyons for 3 days, and the midday heat struck like red-hot iron. His brown mare, Whiskey, snorted with every step, exhausted but faithful as always. The Arizona desert forgives no one. It doesn't care if you are rich or poor, white or Apache, good or bad. The sun falls equally on everyone, silent and asking no questions. Colt knew this better than anyone. He had seen strong men fall to their knees begging for water. He had buried companions who underestimated the power of the heat. But nothing prepared him for what he was about to find. As he skirted a formation of red rocks, something caught his attention, a flash of fabric among the stones. Colt halted Whiskey and squinted against the blinding sun. A dead animal? Abandoned clothes? He approached slowly, with the caution of someone who had survived in wild territory. And then he saw her. An Apache woman lay among the rocks, motionless. Her dark skin was burned by the sun. Her lips cracked like dry earth. Her traditional embroidered clothes were torn and covered in dust. She was barely breathing. Colt jumped off Whiskey before the horse had even come to a complete stop. He knelt beside the woman and checked for a pulse. Weak, but she was alive. He took out his canteen and gently poured water onto her parched lips. "Come on, miss, come on," he murmured, carefully supporting her head. The woman's eyelids trembled. Slowly, very slowly, she opened her eyes. They were the color of molten amber, beautiful but filled with terror. When she saw Colt's face above her, her body tensed immediately. "No, don't hurt me," she whispered in broken English, trying to pull away with the little strength she had left. "Please, calm down, Colt said, his voice firm but gentle, raising his hands to show he was not a threat. "I'm not going to hurt you. You need water. You need urgent help." The woman looked at him with distrust, but thirst was stronger than fear. She drank desperately from the canteen, coughing between sips. The spilled water ran down her neck, mixing with the desert dust. "How long have you been here?" asked Colt, quickly assessing her condition. Severe dehydration, possibly heat stroke. She needed medical attention soon. Two days, she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "I got lost looking for herbs." Colt looked toward the horizon. The sun was at its highest, most merciless point. Then he looked at the woman, and then at his mare, Whiskey. He did some quick mental calculations. The nearest Apache camp was at least 2 hours away. She couldn't walk. She could barely stay conscious. There was only one option. Without hesitating a second longer, Colt lifted the woman into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile as an injured bird. He carefully placed her on Whiskey, making sure she was secure in the saddle. What are you doing?" the woman asked, confused. Her eyes widened in disbelief when she saw Colt take Whiskey's reins and begin walking on foot. "I'm taking you to your people," Colt replied simply, beginning to walk under a sun that burned like hellfire. "But your horse?" The woman looked at him as if he had lost his mind. "It's your only horse in the desert." "Without a horse, and you are a person who is dying," Colt interrupted, adjusting his hat. "My horse can carry you faster. I have 2 legs that work fine." Note to listeners, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments where you are listening from. We love hearing from you. A profound silence fell between them. The woman watched the cowboy walking under the brutal sun, sacrificing his own safety, his only means of transport, for a complete stranger, for an Apache, in a territory where their peoples had been enemies for generations. "Why?" she finally asked, tears forming in her eyes. "Why do you do this for me?" Colt walked several paces before answering, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with each step. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally, with a simplicity that disarmed any argument. Nothing more than that. Tears rolled down Senna's cheeks, mixing with dust and sweat. In that moment, she knew she had found something rare in the desert. Not water, not shelter, but something much more valuable. A man of true honor. "My name is Senna," she said softly. "Senna of the Chiricahua tribe." "Colt Morrison," he replied without stopping. "And it is an honor to meet you, Senna." For the next 2 hours, Colt walked under the relentless Arizona sun. His shirt soaked with sweat. His lips began to crack. Thirst tormented him, but he did not complain once. Every step was a test of will, every minute a battle against the suffocating heat. Senna watched in silence from atop the horse, still unable to believe what she was witnessing. She had heard stories about white cowboys all her life, stories of greed, violence, and betrayal. But this man was rewriting everything she thought she knew. "My father is the chief of our tribe," she said finally, breaking the silence. "Thunder Sky. He is a wise man, but also very protective." "He has reason to be," Colt replied, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "This territory is no place to wander alone." "I thought I knew the way," Senna admitted with embarrassment. "But when night fell, the stars looked different. I became disoriented. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they spotted the tents of the camp in the distance. But before they could take another step, a dozen warriors emerged from between the rocks, like spirits of the desert, surrounding them with spears raised. "Senna," shouted one of them, a young warrior with ceremonial paint on his face. He ran toward her with urgency. "I am well, Dakota," Senna said weakly but firmly. "This man saved my life. He gave me his only horse and walked under the desert sun for me." The warriors lowered their spears slowly, looking at Colt with a mixture of surprise and suspicion. It was unprecedented. A white cowboy sacrificing himself for an Apache. The leader of the group, an older warrior with deep battle scars on his chest, approached Colt. His dark eyes studied the cowboy from head to toe. "Is what my niece says true?" "Yes, sir," Colt replied, respectfully, holding the warrior's gaze without challenge, but without fear. "I found her dying. I could not leave her." The warrior nodded slowly, with an expression Colt couldn't fully decipher. "Come," he said finally. Chief Thunder Sky must hear this story. As they walked toward the camp, Senna looked at Colt from her position on Whiskey. Her eyes no longer showed distrust, but something much deeper. Gratitude, yes, but also a question resonating in her soul. Who really was this man who had risked everything for a stranger? The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Shadows lengthened over the red desert earth, and neither of them knew that this encounter, this decision made in a second under the scorching sun, would change the course of their lives forever. Two worlds were about to collide, and from that collision something unpredictable would be born. The story was just beginning. The Apache camp was different from anything Colt had imagined. It was not a place of chaos or violence, but a home. Families gathered around fires, children playing between the teepees, women weaving in the shade of trees. But when he arrived escorted by warriors, the entire camp stopped. Whispers began immediately. A white cowboy in sacred territory, elders came out of their tents. Mothers called their children. Warriors took strategic positions. The tension in the air was so thick it could be cut with a knife. "Take Senna to the healers," ordered the older warrior. "The cowboy comes with me." Two older women approached and helped Senna down from Whiskey. She looked back at Colt with evident concern in her eyes, but he gave her a reassuring nod. He had made his decision. Now he would have to face the consequences. He was led to the largest tent in the camp, decorated with sacred symbols and animal skins. Inside, sitting on a ceremonial blanket, was Chief Thunder Sky. He was an imposing man despite his age, with gray braided hair and eyes that seemed to look directly into people's souls. "Chief," said the older warrior, bowing his head in respect, "this cowboy found Sena in the desert. He says he gave her his only horse and walked 2 hours under the sun to bring her home." Thunder Sky observed Colt in silence for a long moment. The cowboy held his gaze without arrogance but without fear. He had done the right thing and would not apologize for it. "Why?" the chief finally asked, his voice deep like the thunder of his name. "Because she was dying," Colt replied simply, "and because it was the right thing to do." "Your people do not usually think this way about ours," said Thunder Sky. His tone was neutral, but his words carried a painful truth. "I cannot speak for others," said Colt. "I can only speak for myself, and I do not let anyone die if I can avoid it." A dense silence filled the tent. The counselors surrounding the chief exchanged glances. This was unusual, extraordinary. A cowboy with genuine honor was as rare as rain in the desert. "Go," Thunder Sky said finally. "Return tomorrow at dawn." Colt nodded, knowing he should not push his luck. The warriors escorted him to the edge of the camp where they returned whiskey to him. He mounted his mare and rode away slowly, feeling dozens of eyes on his back. That night, Colt camped an hour from Apache territory. He lit a small fire and sat under the stars, wondering what he had unleashed with his action. In his mind, he kept seeing those amber eyes, that look of disbelief when he gave her his horse. Meanwhile, in the Apache camp, Thunder Sky convened an urgent council. Elders, warriors, and sages gathered around the central fire. "This cowboy has shown an honor we did not expect," the chief began. "He sacrificed his only means of transport. He risked his life under the desert sun for my daughter without asking for anything in return." "Could it be a trick?" warned one of the younger warriors. "Cowboys are cunning." "No," Sena interrupted. She had insisted on being present despite her weakness. "I saw his eyes. There was no deception, only kindness." Thunder Sky nodded slowly. "An act of such magnitude deserves to be honored. If we do not respond with the same level of generosity, it will be we who lack honor." "What do you propose, Chief?" asked one of the elders. Thunder Sky's eyes shone with determination. "Tomorrow we will give him a gift that equals his sacrifice." When the sun began to tint the sky pink and orange, Colt rode back to the Apache camp. His heart pounded hard. He didn't know what to expect. Would there be trouble? Would they simply let him go? But what he saw as he approached left him completely paralyzed. In front of the camp, organized in perfect formation, were 50 horses. But these were not common horses. They were thoroughbreds, magnificent, with coats that shone under the dawn light like liquid gold, dark chocolate, and polished coal. Defined muscles, intelligent eyes, noble posture. The most beautiful herd Colt had ever seen in his life. And at the front of them stood Thunder Sky with Sena by his side. She looked recovered, wearing clean clothes, and her hair braided with ceremonial beads. Colt dismounted slowly, unable to believe his eyes. His mind tried to process the scene as he walked toward the Apache chief. "Colt Morrison," said Thunder Sky with a solemn, ceremonial voice, "yesterday you gave your only horse to save my daughter's life. You walked under the desert sun without thinking of your own safety. You showed an honor that few men of any people possess." The chief paused, letting his words resonate in the morning air. In our culture, an act of such magnitude cannot go unanswered. These 50 thoroughbred horses are the finest breeding of our tribe, selected over generations. They are our most precious treasure. Colt shook his head, overwhelmed. "Chief, I did not do what I did expecting a reward. I only did what was right." "I know," replied Thunder Sky. For the first time, a small smile appeared on his stern face. "And that is precisely why you deserve this gift. A man who asks for nothing is a man worthy of receiving everything." "I cannot accept this," Colt insisted, though his voice trembled with emotion. "It is too much." Sena stepped forward. Her eyes shone with held-back tears. "Please," she said softly, "if you reject this gift, you reject our honor. You reject a father's gratitude for his daughter's life. Would you do that?" Colt looked at Sena, then at Thunder Sky, then at the magnificent horses waiting. Never in his life had he dreamed of owning such wealth. 50 thoroughbreds were worth a fortune enough to completely change his life. He began, his voice breaking. I am honored, deeply honored. Thundersky placed his hand on Colt's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning. In Apache culture, touching a stranger was a sign of absolute trust. These horses are yours, declared the chief. But with them comes something more important. A friendship between your people and mine. A bridge between two worlds. The warriors of the camp, who had watched in silence, began to strike their spears against the ground in approval. It was a rhythmic sound, like the beating of a giant heart. Colt felt hot tears rolling down his dusty cheeks. They were not tears of sadness, but of something he had never felt with such intensity. Belonging, acceptance, genuine respect. I don't know what to say, he admitted, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Say nothing, replied Thundersky. Just promise that this bridge we have built will not break. That when my people need a friend, you will be there. Colt extended his hand, but Thundersky took it differently, gripping the forearm in a warrior-to-warrior salute. I promise, said Colt with a firm voice. By my life and my honor. Senna smiled, and in that smile, Colt saw something that made him feel richer than the 50 thoroughbreds. He saw hope. He saw the possibility of a different world, where people were judged by their actions, not by the color of their skin or their origin. The sun continued its ascent, bathing the desert in golden light, and in that moment, under the infinite Arizona sky, two worlds that had been enemies for generations began to find common ground. It had all started with a simple act of kindness, a man giving his only horse to a stranger, and now that act had become something much bigger. A promise, an alliance, a different future. The herd of thoroughbreds neighed as if celebrating the moment. And Colt Morrison knew with absolute certainty that his life would never be the same again. The weeks following the exchange of the horses were the strangest of Colt's life. He drove the herd of 50 thoroughbreds to his modest ranch on the outskirts of the territory, and the news spread like wildfire throughout the region. The other cowboys couldn't believe it. Some thought Colt had stolen the horses. Others suspected he had made some shady deal. But when he explained the truth, most simply shook their heads in disbelief. You gave your only horse to an Apache, repeated his neighbor Tom Bradley for the 5th time. And they gave you 50 thoroughbreds. That's impossible. Impossible or not, it happened, Colt replied each time without going into details. He didn't need to convince anyone. He knew what he had done and why. But what really changed his life wasn't the horses. It was what happened 3 days later. Colt was repairing a fence on the boundary of his property when he saw a figure on horseback approaching from the east. He squinted against the sun and immediately recognized the elegant posture and black braided hair. It was Senna. She rode with the grace of someone born on a horse, moving as if she and the animal were one. When she reached Colt, she dismounted with a fluid motion. Hello, Colt Morrison, she said with a smile that lit up her face. Senna, he replied, removing his hat in respect. Is everything okay, your father? Everything is fine, she interrupted. I have come because I am curious. Curiosity? Yes. Senna looked around the ranch with genuine interest. You saved my life, but I know nothing about you. What kind of man are you? How do you live? My father says that to build a bridge between two worlds, we must first know those worlds. Colt smiled. It was logic he couldn't argue with. Well, there isn't much to see. Just a small ranch, some corrals, and now 50 magnificent horses that I still don't know what to do with. Teach me, said Senna simply, and so began something extraordinary. Colt showed her his ranch, explaining how he repaired fences, how he trained horses, how he survived in this harsh territory. Senna listened attentively, asking intelligent questions that demonstrated a sharp and curious mind. In my tribe, we train horses differently, she commented, while watching Colt work with one of the thoroughbreds. We don't use the reins as much. We communicate with them in another way. How? Asked Colt, genuinely interested. Senna approached the horse and began speaking to it in her native language, her voice soft as the wind. She placed her hand on the animal's neck and closed her eyes. The horse, which had been restless moments before, calmed down immediately. Its ears relaxed, its breathing slowed. "It's like a dance," explained Senna. "You don't fight against the horse, you dance with it. You become part of it, and it becomes part of you." Colt watched, fascinated. In all his years working with horses, he had never seen anything like it. "Could you teach me?" Senna's eyes sparkled. "A cowboy who wants to learn from the Apaches. That is new." "A wise man learns from whoever has knowledge," replied Colt. "And clearly you have much to teach." Over the next few weeks, Senna visited the ranch regularly. She taught Colt Apache techniques for training horses, reading weather signs, and finding water in the desert. And Colt, in turn, taught her about the cowboy world, the tools they used, and how not trying to they survived the harsh conditions of the frontier. But more important than the shared knowledge was the friendship blossoming between them. They talked for hours under the sunset, sharing stories of their lives, their fears, their dreams. "Why do you live alone?" Senna asked one day, while resting in the shade of a mesquite tree. Colt shrugged. "I never found a reason to settle down. The desert is my home. The horses are my family." "That sounds lonely," Senna observed softly. "Sometimes it is," Colt admitted. "And you? Why haven't you married? I imagine many warriors in your tribe would be interested." Senna laughed, a sound like bells in the wind. "My father is very protective, and I am very demanding. I don't want a warrior who is only strong. I want someone who is brave of heart, someone who does the right thing even when it is difficult." Their gazes met, and something passed between them, a silent recognition, an understanding that went beyond words. News of this unusual friendship spread quickly, and not everyone was happy. In the nearest town, cowboys muttered with disapproval. In the Apache camp, some young warriors saw Senna's closeness to Colt as a betrayal. One day, while Colt was visiting town to buy supplies, a group of cowboys confronted him outside the general store. "Morrison," said Jack Dawson, a rough man with a scar on his cheek. "We've heard you spend a lot of time with the Apaches. That doesn't look good." "I don't care how it looks," Colt replied firmly. "They are good people." "Good people?" Dawson scoffed. "They are savages, and you are betraying your own race." Colt felt anger rise in his chest, but he controlled it. "The only betrayal here is judging people without knowing them. Thunder Sky and his tribe have shown me more honor and generosity than most white men I know." "Watch your words, Morrison," Dawson warned, stepping closer threateningly. But before the situation escalated, the sheriff, an older man named Ben Cooper, intervened. "That's enough, Dawson. Morrison isn't breaking any law. If he wants to be friends with the Apaches, that is his right." Dawson spat on the ground but walked away, casting one last warning glance at Colt. That night, when Colt told Senna about the incident, she nodded with understanding. "In my camp, there is resistance too. Dakota, the warrior you saw the first day, says I am spending too much time away, that I am forgetting our traditions." "And what did you tell him?" "That knowing another world does not mean forgetting yours," Senna replied with determination. "It means expanding your heart so there is room for both." Colt smiled. "Your father was right. To build a bridge, you need to know both sides." "And we are building it," said Senna, looking at the sunset painting the sky in impossible colors. Brick by brick, word by word, experience by experience. In the following weeks, others began to cross that bridge. Some curious cowboys visited the Apache camp, invited by Thunder Sky. Some young Apaches visited Colt's ranch, learning about different cattle working techniques. Not everyone accepted this new world. There was resistance on both sides, but slowly, like water eroding rock, friendship began to change attitudes. One afternoon, while Colt and Senna practiced horse training techniques, she stopped and looked at him seriously. "Colt, thank you." "For what? For not seeing me only as an Apache," she said softly. "For seeing me as a person, as Senna. That means more than you imagine." Colt felt his heart beat faster. "That's easy because you are extraordinary, Senna. not for being Apache or not being Apache, but for being you. The desert wind blew between them, carrying the scent of sage and the promise of distant rain. And in that moment, both knew that what was growing between them was more than friendship. It was the beginning of something that could change not only their lives, but the future of everyone around them. The bridge between two worlds was becoming stronger every day, and what held it together was not planks or ropes, but something much more powerful: genuine respect, sincere curiosity, and the courage to see beyond differences. The Arizona sky had been restless for days. Dark clouds accumulated on the horizon like armies gathering for battle. Animals behaved strangely, nervous and uneasy. Birds flew low, seeking refuge. Even Colt's horses neighed with anxiety. "Something big is coming," said Senna one morning, observing the sky with concern. She had ridden to the ranch early, which was unusual for her. "My father sent messengers to all nearby tribes. He says the signs are bad." Colt looked toward the horizon where clouds swirled like ink spilled in water. "What kind of signs?" "A sandstorm," Senna replied, her voice tense, "but not a common one. The elders say it will be like the great storm of 20 years ago, the one that destroyed entire camps." As if the universe wanted to confirm her words, a strong wind began to blow from the west. It was different from the normal desert wind. This one had a cutting edge, charged with electricity and danger. "We need to warn everyone," Colt said immediately, his mind already evaluating options. "Your camp, the town, the scattered ranches. There are families living alone miles away." "My father is already organizing our people," said Senna, "but the cowboys in town don't trust our warnings. They think they are superstitions." Colt cursed under his breath. The distrust that had existed for generations could now cost lives. "Then we have to show them this is real. We have to work together." For the next few hours, Colt and Senna rode at full speed between the scattered ranches, warning every family they found. Some listened, especially those who knew Colt. Others rejected them with distrust, especially when they saw Senna. "I don't need advice from Apaches," grunted a rancher named Dutch Williams, spitting tobacco on the ground. "I've been in this territory for 30 years. I've seen storms before." "This one is different," Colt insisted. "Please, Dutch, at least take your family to town. You'll be safer there." "Get off my property," Williams replied, slamming the door in their faces. As they rode toward the next ranch, the wind intensified. The temperature dropped dramatically. The sky darkened until it seemed almost like night, although it was barely noon. "It's coming," said Senna, her voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. "It's coming now." And then they saw it. A wall of sand rising from the horizon like a moving mountain. It was massive, terrifying, unstoppable. The storm roared like 1,000 wild beasts, devouring everything in its path. "We need shelter," Colt shouted over the din. Senna pointed east. "The ancient caves, 20 minutes from here." But as they rode desperately, they saw something that made their hearts stop. A group of people was trapped in open field. They were 3 families from town who had gone out early for a picnic, unaware of the approaching danger. And among them, Colt recognized with horror the Williams family, the family that had rejected them minutes earlier. "We can't leave them," Colt shouted, although every survival instinct told him to flee. "The caves are too far for everyone," Senna replied, but she was already directing her horse toward the trapped group. They reached the terrified families just as the first wave of sand hit them. It was like being hit by thousands of needles, blinding and ruthless. The children's screams were lost in the roar of the wind. "Follow me," Senna shouted with all the strength of her lungs. "I know a place closer. Why should we trust you?" Dutch Williams shouted, but his voice trembled with fear. "Because if you don't, you will die," Colt replied. "And she is your only hope." In that moment of absolute crisis, differences no longer mattered. Survival was the only thing that counted. The families began to follow Senna, who guided them with a confidence that could only come from generations of desert knowledge. She led them through the landscape that was rapidly disappearing under flying sand. Colt rode at the rear, ensuring no one was left behind. Visibility was nearly zero. Breathing was a battle. Every second seemed like an eternity. "There!" Senna finally shouted, pointing to a rock formation barely visible through the storm. It was an ancient cave, not as large as the others, but spacious enough for everyone. They pushed the families inside just as the storm reached its maximum fury. The roar was deafening, as if the whole world were being devoured. Inside the cave, everyone huddled together, shivering and coughing up sand. There were 15 people in total, white families who had never spoken to Apaches, and an Apache woman who had just saved all their lives. "Thank you," Dutch Williams finally whispered, looking at Senna with eyes full of tears and shame. "Thank you. I'm sorry. I was a fool." Senna nodded without words. She was exhausted, covered in sand and blood from small cuts, but she was alive. Everyone was alive. While the storm raged outside, something extraordinary began to happen inside the cave. The barriers that had existed for generations began to crumble. One of the women shared water from her canteen with Senna, a small child curled up beside her seeking comfort. Dutch Williams sat next to Colt and began to talk. Really talk for the first time. "My father taught me to distrust Apaches," the old rancher admitted. "His father had taught him the same, and so on for generations. But your friend just saved my family, saved my granddaughter." "She's not just my friend," Colt said softly, looking at Senna across the dimness of the cave. "She is someone very special." Hours passed slowly. The storm continued its relentless fury outside, but inside the cave something new was happening. People began sharing stories. Children played together, ignoring the differences that obsessed their parents. Mothers talked about the difficulties of raising children in harsh territory. Colt watched Senna as she interacted with the families. There was something in the way she moved, in how she spoke to the children, in her quiet strength, that made him feel things he had never felt before. It wasn't just admiration or respect. It was something deeper, more fundamental. And when their eyes met across the cave, dimly lit by improvised candles, Colt saw that Senna felt the same. In that confined space, surrounded by people from two worlds learning to coexist, something beautiful and terrifying was blooming between them. Colt called Senna softly after several hours. She had moved away toward the entrance of the cave, watching as the storm finally began to subside. He approached and stood beside her. Their shoulders almost touched. He could feel the warmth of her body despite the cold wind. "Thank you for not leaving them behind," she said, "for risking your life for people who rejected you." "I learned from the best," Colt replied with a smile, "from someone who didn't see a stranger in the desert, but a human being who needed help." Senna turned to him, her eyes shining in the dim light. "Colt Morrison, you are different from any man I have ever known, or any cowboy." "Senna of the Chiricahua," he replied, his voice deep with emotion. "You have changed my life. You have changed my entire world." The moments stretched between them, charged with possibilities. But before they could say more, one of the children shouted, "Look, the storm is leaving." It was true. The wall of sand was passing, leaving behind a completely transformed landscape. When it was finally safe to go out, everyone emerged from the cave like survivors from another era. The world outside was unrecognizable. Sand dunes covered what used to be paths. Uprooted trees lay like fallen giants, but they were alive. Everyone was alive. "We need to check the camps," Senna said immediately, her mind already thinking of her people. "And the ranches," Colt added. "We need to organize search teams." Dutch Williams stepped forward, followed by the other men. "We will work together," he said firmly. "Apaches and cowboys. If this storm taught us anything, it's that none of us can survive alone in this territory." And so, under a sky that began to clear, two communities that had been enemies for generations began to work side by side. The days after the storm were a whirlwind of activity. Mixed teams of cowboys and Apaches worked tirelessly to recover what was lost, repair damage, and rescue those who had been isolated. The barriers that had existed for generations crumbled before the urgent need for collaboration. Colt and Senna became the living bridge between both communities. They translated not only words but intentions and cultures. When cowboys didn't understand Apache customs, they explained. When Apaches distrusted the cowboys' intentions, they mediated. A week after the storm, Thunder Sky convened a special meeting. He invited all ranchers and town residents to the Apache camp. It was unprecedented, and many hesitated to attend. But Dutch Williams, transformed by the experience in the cave, convinced the others. If that Apache woman could save our lives, the least we can do is listen to her father, he argued firmly. The meeting took place under the open desert sky, with bonfires illuminating the circle where people from both worlds sat. Thunder Sky stood up, his presence imposing, but his face showing warmth. "A month ago, my daughter nearly died in the desert," he began, his voice resonating in the night. "A cowboy named Colt Morrison gave her his only horse and risked his life to save her. That day I learned that honor has no skin color." He paused, letting his words resonate. "The storm taught us another lesson, that alone we are vulnerable, but together we can survive anything. My people and yours have been enemies for a long time, but that enmity is killing us all." Sheriff Ben Cooper stood up from the cowboy side. "Chief Thunder Sky, many of us have seen the change with our own eyes. Your daughter and Colt showed us a different path, a better path." "Then I propose something," Thunder Sky continued. "A formal alliance between our communities. We will share knowledge about the territory. We will warn each other of dangers. We will trade fairly and protect these lands together." Murmurs began on both sides, some of approval, others of doubt, but most voices were positive. The storm had changed perspectives, opened eyes, softened hardened hearts. "I support this," declared Dutch Williams, standing up. "My family is alive thanks to this collaboration."
"I vote yes."
One by one, others stood in support. Not everyone agreed. Some young warriors and older cowboys remained seated with hard expressions, but they were the minority. The majority saw the wisdom in this new alliance. When the voting ended, it was official. For the first time in the history of that territory, Apaches and settlers would have a peace and cooperation agreement. After the meeting, while the celebration began with food and music from both cultures, Colt found Senna away from the main group, looking at the stars. "Why are you here alone?" he asked, sitting beside her on a smooth rock. "You should be celebrating. This is largely thanks to you." Senna smiled softly. "I am happy for the alliance. Truly I am. But I am also thinking about what this means for us." "For us?" Colt's heart began to beat faster. "Colt, I am not foolish," Senna said, turning to look at him directly. "I know what I feel when I am near you, and I think you feel the same." Colt swallowed, all his carefully rehearsed words evaporating under the intensity of her gaze. "Senna, from the moment I saw you in that desert, something changed inside me. At first, I thought it was just concern, then respect, then friendship. But now," Senna encouraged him with a smile playing on her lips. "Now I know it is love," Colt admitted, his voice trembling with emotion. "I love you, Senna. I love your courage, your wisdom, your kindness. I love how you see the world. I love who you are." Senna's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of happiness. "I love you too, Colt Morrison. But you know it won't be easy. There will be people on both sides who will not approve." "I don't care," Colt said firmly, taking her hands in his. "We have built a bridge between two worlds. We can build a life together too." Senna laughed softly, wiping her tears. "My father is very traditional. You will need to ask for my hand in the correct way." "Then teach me how," Colt replied without hesitation. "I will do whatever is necessary. I will learn all your traditions. I will earn his respect in the appropriate way." At that moment, as if he had been waiting for their signal, Thunder Sky appeared from the shadows. Both Colt and Senna startled, but the chief raised a hand in a reassuring gesture. "I have been watching you for weeks," Thunder Sky said, his voice gentle but serious. "I have seen how you look at each other, how you care for one another. A wise father recognizes when his daughter has found someone special. Colt stood up immediately, showing respect. Chief Thunder Sky, I love your daughter. I love her with all my heart, and if you allow me, I would like to marry her. The silence that followed seemed eternal. Thunder Sky studied Colt with those penetrating eyes that looked straight into people's souls. When you saved my daughter in the desert, I saw your character, the chief said finally. When you accepted the 50 horses with humility, I saw your honor. When you risked your life to save strangers in the storm, I saw your heart. Colt Morrison, you would be welcome in my family. Senna let out a cry of joy and threw herself into her father's arms. Thunder Sky hugged her tightly, smiling in a way few had seen. But, the chief added, separating from his daughter and looking at Colt seriously, you must understand what this means. It will not just be a marriage. It will be a symbol for everyone. A reminder that love can exist where before there was only division. I understand, Colt replied, and I accept that responsibility with pride. Then you have my blessing, declared Thunder Sky. The following weeks were for preparation. The wedding was planned as an event combining traditions from both cultures. It would be celebrated at the midpoint between the Apache camp and the town, a place symbolizing the new bridge between two worlds. The wedding day arrived with a spectacular dawn. The sky was painted in impossible colors, as if the universe itself were celebrating the union. People from both communities gathered, more than 200 souls mixing without the old divisions. Senna looked dazzling in a dress that mixed traditional Apache elements with a touch of cowboy style. Colt wore his best suit with incorporated Apache ceremonial details to honor his future wife's family. The ceremony was led by Thunder Sky and Sheriff Cooper, each representing their respective communities. When they finally pronounced their vows, there was not a single dry eye among those present. I promise to love you, Colt said, his voice clear and strong. I promise to honor your traditions and teach you mine. I promise to build with you a home where two worlds become one. I promise to love you, Senna replied, tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks. I promise to be your companion in all adventures. I promise that our love will be the bridge that unites not only our lives but our communities. When they kissed, sealing their union, cheers and celebrations filled the desert air. Apaches and cowboys celebrated together, sharing food, music, and joy. As the sun set that day, painting the desert gold and purple, Colt and Senna stood on a hill looking at their new world. The 50 thoroughbreds grazed in the distance, a symbol of the gift that had started it all. What are you thinking? Senna asked, cuddling against her new husband. I'm thinking about that day in the desert, Colt replied. When I gave you mine only horse, I thought I was making a sacrifice. But in reality, I was making the best investment of my life. Senna smiled. You gave a horse and gained 50. You saved a life and found a new purpose. You built a bridge and found love. No, Colt corrected her softly. We built a bridge and what we found was greater than either of us. We found hope. And as the stars began to shine in the infinite sky, two people from different worlds but with united hearts looked toward the future they had created together. A future where love was stronger than hate, where understanding replaced fear, and where two worlds could coexist in harmony. The story that had begun with a simple act of kindness had blossomed into something extraordinary, and this was only the beginning of a new era in the Arizona desert.